We're live, just no one's joined us yet.
To be fair, we are a bit late. They probably thought we weren't doing one. We are live. Okay.
We are live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I'm going to start prepping anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this lovely Friday afternoon. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to do some of my colleagues call them a sausage garland, but this is a netted garland. So it's basically little tiny sausage shapes of oasis held together by a net, which are fantastic for suspending garlands, putting them over arches. They're really useful. You can even, as we have done, is cut them in individual sections and use each netted section and cable tie it onto archways and things like that, which will actually help to secure them quite happily, rather than using the paddle containers, which are sometimes a bit bulky. So yeah, this is a netted garland. They have 12 little sausages per garland, and they are £13.65 plus VAT on our website, and absolutely invaluable for garland work. So I'm now going to soak them in my very, very, very tasteful washing up bowl. Didn't quite fit in there. Okay, so I'm actually only going to do a part of the garland today, simply because it is a little bit time consuming, and you really don't want to be drinking your cocoa and wearing your slippers by the time I've finished. Plus the fact it'll be dark and you won't see me. So just soaking those quite successfully. What I suggest you do, if you want to get ahead, you can actually make these up the day before, or even foliage them up the day before that. Once you've made them, I would line a floristry box with cellophane, and then you can put the completed garland in that and it will store quite happily. So just finishing soaking up these garlands. Bear in mind that obviously as you push stems into the wet oasis, you're going to get a lot of water coming out. So I would recommend that you make them up somewhere other to where the venue is where you're installing them. Because if you do them on site, you are going to get a lot of drippage. Not good in a nice wooden floored, expensive venue. So outside of the church or something like that is absolutely fine. Okay, so soaked garland. I'm just going to move my washing up bowl. Now, do feel able to pose any questions. Give us a like button if you can, hit that like button if you can hear us well this afternoon. And please do join us and tell us what you're doing this weekend. Nice bank holiday weekend. Right, so the foliage that I'm using is, just get rid of that piece, Wygelia. Now this is all garden cut foliage that we've got here. So bear in mind that does need to be conditioned well before you use it. So this has been in water for 2 days now. So I've got Wygelia, I've got some Cornus. Okay. I've also got some Lelandii and some laurel. So quite a nice selection of foliage here. You will find the more varieties of foliage that you use, the more textures that you add, the more of a country garden rustic feel that you get. Okay, my flower selection that I have, I'm going to foliage first and then do flowers, but just so that you're aware of what I'm using. I have yellow antirrhinums. You might know them as snapdragons, or you might even know them as nipnoses. They are sold in multiples of 10. I've got absolutely beautiful rose here. This one's a David Austin rose with a beautiful fragrance. This one's called Edith. They are sold in multiples of 12. I have some Delphinium Atlantis. They're sold in multiples of 10. I have Craspedia, or you might know them as Billy Buttons or Billy Balls. They're sold in multiples of 50. And a really interesting rose here called Romanza. Now it has the look of a country garden, or it has the look of a garden rose, but actually it's not sold as a garden rose, but you can see it's multi-petaled and it's got that almost peony-esque appearance once it's fully developed. I've just pulled the outer guard petals off there just to tidy it up a little bit. So that's our foliage and flower selection. So start with the greenery. So it does depend obviously on where the garland is being placed, whether you need it to be three-dimensional or whether it can be just front facing, as it were. This one I'm going to do as front facing. So starting off with the greenery. I would recommend that if you are doing it as a front facing, you make sure you can still see where your tying points are. So don't cover those up because it's going to make it really difficult when you're on site to actually locate them.
Just move that foliage, so that's that. Yeah, and then just move that way, so you can't see what they're doing.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with the laurel. So just doing a base of the laurel. So that can determine the width and the dimensions of the garland. I'm placing the stems in quite firmly. So obviously, if it is an outdoor garland that you're using or you're making, if it is slightly windy, you don't want all the flowers and foliage to blow out of the garland. So placing the stems in as far as I possibly can. And just making sure that the two sausages actually join together.
I've got a few questions.
Excellent.
So we've got a few hellos, so we've got, let's do our mentions just quickly. So we've got hi from Kathy, hi from Jane.
Hi
Jill,
Kathy, Jane.
Misty, we've got Aim, sister.
Hi Amy.
We've got Kathy who asked a question, why do you blow down on the centre of the roses?
Oh, so that's to actually help them open up a little bit. These have actually just come out of the cold store, so they've come out really, really tight. I'll use this one, might be a slightly better example to show you. So you can see they're quite tightly knit. If you gently blow on them, you can already see what a difference that's made in the development of the rose. Okay, so that's why I do it. Nothing technical, I'm afraid. very simple. So adding some more of the foliage here, and moving on to the second sausage, as it were. So if I hold this up, you can see how the first sausage is basically added, and you can see already what I meant about the drippage. It stands to reason if you're pushing a stem into wet oasis, the water that you're pushing out has got to go somewhere. So just adding some more of the laurel.
So if you were to buy a commercial foliage, what would you use?
Hard ruscus, probably, eucalyptus, something that's going to fill in quite well, so maybe the big leaf Pittosporum milan, or pistache would work as well. So anything that's quite dense and can fill the oasis up quite readily. So adding as we're going along. Okay, so as you can see, I've just added some little tiny pieces into the centre of each sausage, just so you're keeping that continuity. You don't want it to look as if you've just got a collar of foliage. Let's move my roses over. Okay. I'm just going to move that onto my greenery, so we're shanking along so you can still see what I'm doing. So as I was saying, a lot of the foliage I'm using today is garden foliage. So it is foliage that will need to be conditioned well before you work with it. This is particularly woody stemmed. So I cut this Wednesday evening. Slit the stems up, pop it into buckets of fresh water and store it somewhere cool until you're ready to work with it. It's quite important that it's conditioned well. Same with everything though. So please let us know what you're doing as well this weekend. We've got quite a busy weekend this weekend. We've got several weddings, so you keep us very busy, especially Sunday. So adding the rest of that. So what have we done? We've done three of the sausages so far, and then moving on to the fourth one. So you can already see how much foliage they do require. I've probably used about 8-10 pieces of laurel here, so they're not a cheap option, I have to say. If you have to buy all the foliage to put them together with, they do work out relatively costly, but they are something that you can do in advance. So if it's eucalyptus that you want to use, eucalyptus is incredibly popular at the moment, you can at least make them up a couple of days in advance if you're using eucalyptus, because they're actually going to be drinking. Whereas when you do the tied garlands, the garlands are obviously out of water, so it's not quite so easy to do it in advance. So I'm now going to add in some Lelandii or Cupressus, just basically to give it texture.
Could you use conifer as a replacement for that?
Absolutely, yeah. Conifer, same sort of thing really. And if I was using commercial foliage, I would probably use leatherleaf as a substitute for this. Just adding some little bits in, because as I was saying, the more texture, the more variety that you add, the more of a country garden feel you're going to get. More rustic. Sorry, here my scissors lumping down, I expect. So do ask us some questions. Don't forget to share us with your friends. And for any more tips and hints and how-to guides, do visit our YouTube page, where we've got lots more live stream videos from the past.
So Tracy has a question, once you've finished, how would you attach to a brick arch doorway, please?
A brick arch doorway. Okay, so you're going to have some kind of fixing in the bricks. Either I assume there'd be some kind of nail or something. Otherwise, you're going to have to add this to a freestanding arch to push it up against the brick entrance. It's almost impossible to attach something like this to just brickwork, because you have to have something to anchor it onto. So yeah, you can buy relatively inexpensive garden arches that are freestanding, which you could then potentially put one end of the arch into a bucket of concrete or something like that, perhaps put some plants in that, anchor it so it's manoeuvrable, and then fix this onto the arch itself with probably cable ties. Cable ties are one of my favourite bits of kit. There's nothing you can't achieve without a cable tie and some gaffer tape.
Missy asked a question, which kind of archway is this suitable for? Is it for a metal freestanding?
Yeah, definitely. That would be the best bet. What you will also find sometimes with an entrance to a church, there will be almost like a, how can I explain it? Almost like the relief shape of the arch before the door entrance, and that can actually be laid on top of the relief shape and then fixed on with the aid of nails or anything in the masonry really. But it's not an easy thing to do, I have to say, because there is actually a considerable amount of weight when this is finished, so it does need something to secure onto. So yeah, your archway is your best bet really, and ideally if you have an arch that's got a double row of metal along the top of it, then it's easier still to add into that. So just cutting some more pieces of the conifer off here.
We've got Nicola Slack that's just joined. She's one of our regulars.
Hi Nicola.
Just had 4 huge boxes delivered for a wedding this Sunday, enjoying this demo.
Oh, well, I hope the wedding goes well on Sunday, Nicola. I shall be there in spirit because we've got 2 weddings on Saturday here, so we'll be here busy Sunday morning as well. So yeah, it's very popular.
She always sends us photographs of her weddings that she does.
We love to see what everybody's done, and it's so nice, so rewarding to hear that what we do on our live streams is actually encouraging people to do it themselves. So yeah, love to see what you've achieved. So as you can see, just adding these little bits of conifer in. So already you can see what I mean about the different textures, and in a minute I'm going to add some colour to that as well. So if I just turn it round, you can see the back is almost naked still, for want of a better word. So you can actually place a cable tie through here to secure onto the archway, I'm sorry. So you secure the garland onto the archway. So just so you can see how we're progressing. Do have company in our workroom today. We have one of our florists, Sam, who's working very quietly in the background and keeping very, very quiet on what she's doing as well. She's just nodding, she's not joining in. So, yeah, we've got quite a big team in our floristry department here, haven't we, Laura?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Keep them nice and busy.
Indeed. So just adding a few more pieces into the end of that part of the garland. Well, also what you will find easier is if you actually remove the bottom part of the leaves. Oh, you can see what I mean. So if you take those out, just leaves you that piece to go into the oasis, which makes it so much easier to get into it. I'm going to use those pieces later. So now I'm going to add some colour, and I'm going to use some cornice. Again, this is out of the garden. I'm going to cut it down first into slightly smaller pieces so it's a bit more manageable. Finally achieved my goal and camouflaged. There we go. So I made short work of that. What looked like an enormous piece of foliage reduced to nearly nothing.
Yay!
My friends all shake when I go around and see them for coffee, especially if I go armed with my scissors. No garden is safe if you've got a florist about. Right, so I'm going to add the cornice into the garland to give it that variegated colouring. Again, just adding extra interest to it.
Again, just asking the question, what would you use if you wanted a variegated look with commercial foliage?
I probably would go for the Pittosporum elan, the large leafed pitto. That will give you variegation. You could also use variegated ivy, and Only thing is with the ivy, it does want to trail, so it's probably not a very cost-effective foliage to use in a garland unless you're doing a tied garland. If you're doing a tied garland, then obviously you can bind it in to whatever other foliage you're using. But for an oasis netted garland, it's not the best option really. So you can see you're starting to build up the colouring. And already you can see what a difference that variegated greenery makes. If I hold the two sections up, you can see it adds, you see all right there, Laura? Much more interest. And again, just to illustrate my note about the drippage, making a lot of mess.
So Missy asked a question, if it was on a metal arch,
Yep.
the underneath part...
Yeah, that would show. So what I would recommend you do is you fix it onto the metal arch as it is, like this, with a naked back almost. Then that way you can actually see how to fix it. And then once it's in situ, then just go underneath the arch with your foliage and just cover up any bits that you can see. But you could make it almost 3/4 of the way round. So for example, if I try and show you, I've only done this a half. If you made it 3/4 of the way, then you've only got a small amount of greenery to fill in at the end. But it will make it so much easier to do that filling in afterwards. Otherwise you're going to find it incredibly difficult to fix onto the arch. You literally won't be able to see where you're fixing. Plus the fact, if you turn this over to then do the back, it's going to crush your greenery. So that would be my advice. But like everything, no hard and fast rules. So hopefully that's answered Missy's question. Okay, so nearly there. On the cornice front. So what I suggest to all you lovely florists and flower arrangers out there is you make friends with people that have got really big gardens with lots of greenery in. Or start planting. So just adding a few more pieces into this garland. So you can see it is a relatively time consuming job. Again, I suppose if it's something you're doing as a group effort with brides and bridesmaids or whatever, I suppose theoretically one group could start one end, one start the other, and you meet in the middle.
Would you ever stick the oasis onto the arch before popping it all together?
I probably wouldn't, simply because you won't be able to soak it particularly well that way. Having said that, if it's literally just going to be up for the day and you erect it in the morning, then that's not quite so essential. But no, I personally I would try and get that all soaked before I install. So now I'm going to add some of the Weigelia. Again, just another slightly different colouring. This one's got a yellow variegation. Now, as for a commercial foliage that's got that yellow variegation, I'm struggling to think of one.
Is it Sandrina or something?
Sandrina. And although they won't like me to tell you this, we've now been joined by one of our other florists who's also very quiet in the corner, and she's now going.
Just trying to get us to talk.
Yeah, there you go. It does prove that there's somebody in here. That was Sam, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. They all seem to disappear when we're doing live stream, don't they, Laura? Don't get very many volunteers. I tell you, you wouldn't think they were the same people. They're so quiet when we're doing live stream. When we go off air, as it were.
Not sure what you mean. Missy says, what type of foam would you use for artificial? You just use the dry, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would. Yeah. I suppose that's a valid point, really. If you're doing an artificial one, potentially you can use it time and time again. Perhaps put a few fresh flowers in it when you need to. So we're nearly there on the foliage front.
Oh, that foliage is really annoying me. I'll pop in. Is that Jacina? That's not.
Trying to think of what one you mean. Not Santa Sonia. No, that's not a foliage. So just adding some more pieces of the Wygelia into the end of this garland. Trying to keep it relatively even.
Yeah, the Santarina one. Dracena?
Oh, Dracena.
Yeah.
Got you. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of spiky, so you'd have to cut it down quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because it's but yeah, that is the same. It has definitely got variegation in it, certainly. Right, there we go. So that's our garland greened up. And as I say, I've only done 4 little sections there. And that is actually jolly heavy. So you're going to know you've got that when you're suspending that over a garland. So you might want an extra pair of hands. Okay, so I'm now going to add in some of the flowers. So my focal flowers are going to be my roses. And the David Austin roses, the variety Edith that I mentioned to you that we're using. Obviously they're the most expensive rose that I'm using as well. So my recommendation would be to put those fairly central so you can actually see that they've been used. So now I've cut that stem at an angle. I'm going to slit the stem up just to expose more cells to the oasis. So it just gives it that little bit of extra help in drinking. And popping that in nice and far. Making sure though that it doesn't come out the other end. You don't want it to go right through the oasis, because then obviously it's not going to be drinking. So oh, they smell beautiful. It's a shame you haven't got smelly vision on there. Now this one, Romanza, same principle again, just cutting that. And again, removing the outer guard petals, just to tidy up the rose really. Just checking where my little garlands are. Now there's no reason why, if you've got any gaps, you can't use the rose leaves. You pay for the whole stem, so you may as well use some of the greenery up if you can. Then
So we've got a question. Is there any flowers that you would particularly avoid when you're making a garland?
yeah, soft flowers really. So anything like, I mean, it does very much depend, to be fair, on where you're placing the garland. But if it's going, say for example, outside a church, or you've got a garland arch that's where a bride and groom are getting married, bear in mind the weather is always your unknown factor. So wind or sun is going to affect the flower that you use. So if you're using soft flowers like sweet peas, scabious, stocks, anything like that, with the sun full on them, they're not going to last very well. And likewise, if the wind's battering them about, they're not going to last well. I tend to go for flowers that give huge impact. I mean, hydrangeas are perfect, but again, they're not happy if the sun's shining on them. Big chrysanthemum blooms, anything that's going to give you, impact really. Carnations, chrysanthemums, that sort of thing are very durable, so they work quite well. But yeah, it's a difficult one, that one really, simply because it's something you can't plan for, the weather. So depending on what it does, very much depends on the flower varieties that you use, and also the style that you want. And if you want something that's quite textured and country garden, then it does lend itself more to the softer varieties. So
how would you transport it? In a plastic bag?
No, mentioned earlier, how I would do it is I would actually line a flat florist box with cellophane, and then I'd roll it up like a snake. So lay that on the cellophane and then roll back down the other side of the box. Then I would actually bring the cellophane over inside, put the lid of the box on, and then store it somewhere nice and cool. So adding in the Delphinium Atlantis now. Beautiful vibrant blue. If it will go in. I'm not being too symmetrical. Okay.
Why is that?
Simply because this is quite a country garden feel, so I didn't want it to look like it was too contrived and too set. A bit more natural, hopefully, in its appearance.
We've got Jane who asked about roses, almost off the topic of the arch. Which roses would you use to sprinkle on the floor? I suggested false petals as it pains me to pull a rose apart, but they wanted fresh. Also, would this they want to keep the costs down, but would real be more expensive?
Okay, so as you saw me doing earlier, it's standard industry practice to remove the outer guard petals of a rose anyway before you work with it. So already there, when you're working, if you remove the petals, pop them aside for later, you've already got fresh petals. So you've got to start there. If you are using fresh petals as confetti, I would recommend that you get the roses in a bit earlier than you perhaps would if you were doing bridal work, simply so that they can fully develop, and just buy possibly a lower grade, shorter stem, slightly cheaper alternative maybe. Does that make sense? Yeah, I answered that.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, you can use artificial. Obviously the thing is with those, they're not biodegradable, so just be aware that the venue where you're using them might not be happy to have non-biodegradable flowers, so might be worth just doing a double check there.
Sadly, they won't be using many roses, only a handful for the centrepiece and the buttonholes.
Alright, so you're literally not going to have very many guard petals to remove then. Okay, well, that's something you probably need to discuss with your bride, or potentially just buy, as I said, a lower grade rose, and get them to open up a little bit more quickly, so have them in a little bit earlier than the rest of your roses, and then cut those down. That's probably what I would recommend. Artificial rose petals have their place, but as I say, they're not biodegradable, so they're not suitable for every venue. So all of my delphinium are now in, and my roses. Just hold that up. You can see how we've got a nice lot of drippage going on there. Now I'm just going to add in some antirrhinums. So they're quite a strange choice for a garland, to be fair, because they're quite spiky, but they do give shape and texture.
This is for a wedding.
It is for a wedding. How did you guess?
Where is it for?
This one's actually going to Thorpe Ness Country Club. Well, it will when it's finished, when it's been tweaked. I can't get that in there. I've been a bit too ambitious with the amount of greenery I put in that end bit, I think. Come on, you. Oh, I've got a leaf in the way. That's better. There we go.
How do you know that is it just practice, how much foliage and flowers that you can put into the oasis?
I actually sorry. Okay, so how
So
I
you don't want to overload the sausages, basically.
got you, yeah. Basically, more often than not, comes down to budget as well. Because if you've got a set budget on how much you can spend on something, then obviously that will determine how many flowers you can afford. So it's often more of a case of eking out what you've got as opposed to worrying about having too much in, to be fair. Kind of a judgment call, really. Gosh, how do we answer that, girls? How do we know how much foliage how many flowers to put in? It is kind of experience, I guess, really. Both of my florists have got mouthfuls. They're both eating, and so nobody's answering.
Sorry.
So I'm now going to put some craspedia in. Yeah, I guess it is experience as much as anything. Do be a little bit reluctant to put too many flowers in, because the oasis will eventually crumble.
Yeah.
So I'm going to save those because I'll show you what you can do with some of those later. I'm just popping in the craspedia, which I must confess to not being a massive fan of craspedia, but actually in this garland they work beautifully. Sorry, I hope you guys didn't hear that. That was my stomach. Lunchtime. Doesn't help that all of the florists in here are eating at the moment as well. So they're the little additions of craspedia, and you can see actually what a huge difference they make, don't they? You can really see them well. Oops, sorry, I'm not holding that one very well. It's getting more and more difficult to hold this up, actually. And then my final addition, just to add a little bit of light delicateness and definitely a meadow country garden feel, is the Tanacetum. This particular variety is called Victory Enkel, and it looks a little bit like the old-fashioned field daisies that you used to get, or even chamomile. So very, very delicate, very soft daisies, but it does have a unique fragrance to it, just to warn you.
It lasts quite well in the oasis, or is it?
It will last fine in the oasis, providing it's cut quite short. It's not a massive fan of oasis, but this has actually been conditioned really well, so it shouldn't be an issue. It does prefer to be in just fresh water, but no, this should be absolutely fine. Obviously Gypsophila is even happier in Oasis, so you could use Gyp. But it's actually made quite a nice change this weekend. I don't think any of our weddings are Gypsophila based. So.
We've got a question from Jane. She says, once it's hung, is there any risk of any of the flowers or foliage falling out? Or if pushed in too far, will it make it secure? I ask as when watching how to make a drop bouquet, you wire the longer, heavier flowers in.
Yeah, we do. Okay, so I've actually been pushing all of the stems in as far as I can possibly get them without them going through to the other side and then coming out of the Oasis. But what you actually do find, a similar thing with a shower bouquet to be fair, is the crossing over of the stems. So as they go into the Oasis almost, you've got this kind of scenario going on, and as you add more, it gets more and more crisscrossed. So they kind of anchor each other to a certain extent. So it shouldn't be a problem as long as they are wired in quite, as long as they are placed in the Oasis quite securely. It shouldn't be an issue really.
Could you wire, or is there?
You could wire. What you would need to do though is you'd need to push the wire right through the Oasis and then hook it back in. That is going to be incredibly time consuming. But yeah, if you wanted to do a belt and braces job, you could do that. I personally have never found it necessary. And to be honest, if it was needed to the point where the weather was so windy that you had to wire it in, I would probably even question the idea of using an outdoor garland, because you know, with some of the wind that we have, there's no way it would stand it. So yeah, you could wire.
Jane just said, I'm nodding my head, but you can't see that I'm nodding my head in understanding your comments.
Thanks, Jane. It's nice to know you're nodding though. I feel like you're with me if you're nodding. That's good. No, I appreciate the nod. Okay, so you can actually see when I'm pushing these stems in, I am putting them in quite a way. You can see when I hit the Oasis, I'm then pushing them in, so they're all going in a good 2.5 centimetres. So that's as far as I'm going to go with that for today. Oops, got one little piece left. So you can see how natural and country garden. Oh, can't find the Oasis. Where are you? There we are. In it goes. So you can see how natural and country garden that looks. Now, just for my own peace of mind and for Jane, I'll do the earthquake shake. So nothing's fallen out. It's twisted, but nothing's fallen out. So you can see one snapdragon flower that's fallen off an actual snapdragon stem rather than out of the Oasis. So yeah, hopefully I might have proved my point. That could have gone so horribly wrong then. Anyway, that's our little garland. And what you could also do, if you have that erected onto an arch outside, after the ceremony, if it's not being used anymore, you could also then transfer that onto tables as table runners. That would work well. But what I would probably recommend you do is put some kind of water retaining something on the tables, because as you can see there's a lot of drippage. But that would work beautifully as a table runner.
It would. And would you say it's easier to use the sausages with the table runner as opposed to using bricks of Oasis, or?
Definitely.
Yeah. Definitely.
Because you've got that ability to manipulate. So if you have a really big table and you want to put, if I show you what I mean, by curving it, You could then put a storm lantern here and here or something like that all the way down. So you've actually got flexibility, like a snake really, for want of a better word. And if you want to go round a table, if you've got a horseshoe table, then obviously you can bend it round, as you can see.
Yeah.
Get what I mean?
You could also do like a circle of them and maybe like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could do a ring.
Yeah, and then put a storm lantern in the middle if you wanted to. So yeah, they are really, really flexible in every sense of the word. So they also work really well on a mantelpiece because you can hang, whoops, if I show you what I mean, you can hang them across the top of the mantelpiece, and then you can have some that's trailing down as well if you wanted to. So yeah, they work very well. They're a really utilisable piece of kit, the string garlands.
Perfect.
And I will just show you, they also make a necklace. No, I'm joking.
Jane said, I'm very inspired. I'm looking forward to may do a Christmas garland for my table.
Oh, brilliant.
And then Caitlin said, it looks beautiful. So I'm looking forward to seeing the final result.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you ever so much for joining us this afternoon, everybody. I hope we've inspired you. All I think that's left for us to do is to wish you a fantastic bank holiday weekend. Try and have some flowery fun as well if you can. And we look forward to seeing you on our next live stream. Thank you very much. Bye for now.